I'm an anti-feminist because I think it's oppressive. I think it's anti-male. I think it's anti-femininity.
Now, it may be a very weak Brexit, but I tell you what, Brexit of any kind and leaving those treaties as well.
That's the best ever interview. Michael Parkinson, you got nothing on this bloke.
One of the things I said I admired about politicians is people who say what they mean, and I certainly appreciated you having the courage of your convictions with a few other colleagues to come to the very, very popular and well-attended Rally for Life and the multiple marches for life that were had in the lead up to the gross liberalisation of abortion laws here in Queensland. Now, the Labor Party pretended it was about decriminalising because that was a nice slogan that appealed to people's feelings, but it was a solution looking for a problem because there'd never been anybody criminalised in the history of the laws. 119 years, nobody had been criminalised. And about, just on rough figures, I think conservatively 1 million abortions had been had in that time. So clearly not a high chance of somebody's legal future being at stake. But as I said, I appreciate the conviction that you had to be able to come and speak, because clearly there were thousands upon thousands of people who turned up concerned about the extremity of those laws, just how far they go. Now, I guess the first question I've got two questions for you, but the first part is, the horse now having bolted, it's not impossible to get a horse back in the barn, but the horse now having bolted, what are the reasonable modifications we can make, not to recriminalise abortion, but what could we realistically expect of a candidate or an LNP member to fight for in the new government, in the next government? What reasonable amendments should be made to that law, not wanting to criminalise women again?
Well, certainly there were many parts of the legislation which is now passed which are fundamentally flawed in my view, and some of the protections, particularly in relation to vulnerable women, weren't sufficient within the legislation itself. The 22 weeks gestation was extremely high because certainly after 16 weeks there is significant fetal pain that can be experienced from a fetus being terminated at that stage. And
there's no pain provision, no pain relief provided to a fetus being aborted, is there?
Well, not within the framework that was passed. I mean, clinical practice may evolve over time as to how they sort of implement those processes.
Is it standard now, to your knowledge?
Well, look, I mean, it's variable in various places and clinics, so there's no... And that was one
sometimes?
Of the other... Well, potentially, and sometimes, I guess, we don't have all of the data or the oversight or monitoring of what's happening in some of the private clinics themselves, and certainly that was borne out through the parliamentary inquiry in relation to that certainly some of the data and reporting...
So mandatory pain relief should be an amendment?
Well, it should be mandatory pain relief on that perspective, and certainly, in my view, it should be an offence to do a sex selection termination, and clearly, under this legislation, those things can happen, as well as, late-term terminations as well. So,
and that doesn't affect male babies anywhere near as much as it does female babies?
Well, certainly that's some of the international data that's been borne out where there are higher gestational limits.
Which isn't a very high standard of feminism to allow sex selection.
Well, that was one of the grave concerns around that, and so the legislation itself was fundamentally flawed on some of the technical grounds and grave concerns that were raised by a number of stakeholders from that perspective, and that was one of the reasons that I voted against it. I mean,
what about independent counselling? Is that a reasonable amendment?
Well, I think independent counselling, or the offer of independent counselling, is another safety mechanism, independent of financial bias or any other reasons. Having in-house counselling within some of these services, the last thing people would want is that they were counselled in a particular way for financial conflict of interest reasons. And so again, that is a potential risk within the
cooling off periods.
Well, cooling off periods, again, when we're talking about the ending of life, the taking of life, having a cooling off period would be potentially a sensible way of moving forward in there. But really at this stage, I mean, the reality that people need to understand out there, your viewers, is that elections matter, who you put into the parliament matters, and when elections take place, legislation can be passed. And in this case, we had an election in 2017. The Pellowe Labor government was elected. There was clearly an intent before going into that election that they would reform this area. They had given notice that they were going to take this to the Queensland Law Reform Commission, and they've followed through with what they said. And I'd say to your viewers, to those people who are out there who are concerned about the legislation before it passed, who are still concerned, and whether that's in Queensland or other state jurisdictions.
New South Wales will more than likely have the same agenda at their next government if it's Labor. The previous leader of the opposition, Luke Foley, made it an absolute clear agenda for the next government. I think it's unlikely his replacement walked away from that. So that will probably be the same thing happening in New South Wales. Referral to the Law Reform Commission, which is just a shadow, puppets on a strings, unelected people deciding what laws should be instead of the people elected for those reasons. What's your advice for New South Wales residents? The election matters.
Well, elections matter, and that if you care about good conservative social policy, if you care about good evidence-based policy, you need to be active and you need to be understanding who the candidates are, what they believe in, and what they're going to do if they are fortunate enough to sit in a parliament, and whether that's in New South Wales or in Queensland or the Australian Parliament, and therefore being apathetic leads to bad outcomes. Now that means people need to be an informed voter when they go to the ballot box, and they need to contribute to various organisations to ensure they get the outcomes that they want.
So the horse has bolted here in Queensland. We want to get some of those amendments and maybe some others that we can think of together. Now, one of the things that you're going to be doing soon is you're going to be speaking at the Church and State Summit in February, last weekend of February next year. And there's the Friday afternoon session is going to be largely addressing the questions that many Christians and Christian leaders have, a bit retrospectively, but asking the questions, what can we do as a valid constituency in each electorate? How can we better engage with our candidates and our members of Parliament and support the kind of outcomes that we're looking for with that? Any thoughts on that you can share briefly?
Well, I'd say, look, if people are like-minded, they need to join up a political party of their choosing, whichever one that may be. Now, I believe that the best option is obviously the Liberal National Party. That's why I've joined that, and I've run as a member, and I'm elected member of Parliament. But people, for a variety of reasons, will join other parties, and that's good for democracy. That's healthy for democracy. But they need to join parties that reflect their values and their value systems, and then ensure that they get candidates who are going to reflect that. If they're fortunate to get elected into the various parliaments. If they don't want to join up to a political party, then they need to be active through their organisations. So that's whether they're active through their churches, their community organisations, through sporting clubs, whatever it may be, to ensure that we continue to build social capital within our communities, that families are loved and cherished, and that children grow to be good citizens within their communities and can participate fully from a job perspective, but also raising their kids for the future as well. So my sort of message to many people is become active, care about community, care about the organisations that you're involved in, and if you are politically minded, then please get involved. Make sure you know what candidates are standing for, and if you're working within political parties, you get good representatives who are going to be values-based politicians and conviction politicians.
I think you're being a little bit gentle, and it's probably good in your job to be polite, but I'd actually say, even if you're not politically minded, especially as a Christian, you should be, because these are the issues that affect your neighbours. And one of the greatest commands we're given as Christians is to love our neighbour. So when we're looking at, something like 14,000 neighbours a year being murdered in abortion clinics just here in Queensland, it's not enough. It's not okay to not be politically minded, because these issues are issues of life and death, justice and mercy, which God requires of us. And the instructions are explicit to speak out for those who are unable to speak for themselves, to advocate for justice. And I find the reason I believe what I believe and do what I do in politics is motivated by compassion. And I don't think it's okay to not be politically inclined. Now, I get not everybody's going to be as keen as you or as keen as me to want to make it their vocation. But I think when it comes to election time, just voting and just joining your party isn't enough.
Well, I think you make a good case there, Dave. And what I'd say about that is I would want all Christians to be civic and citizenship minded, and that means being active politically. Now, some people will do that more or less, but I think if they don't do that and they see some of the things that are then implemented, then they can't sort of complain that that they haven't been part of the solution in either preventing or supporting the outcomes that they want to achieve. So I'd say, look, it's a civic duty of all citizens of Queensland and Australia to be politically active, and certainly for Christians being civic minded and ensuring that good active citizenship and being politically active is an important thing to do. So I would encourage them all to do that, but I do know that some people, for a variety of reasons, don't want to do that. There's always something in their life that's more important, and those things. And look, raising children is important, being involved in
but we're not talking about much. We're not talking. It's nice of you to allow the excuses that we try and give ourselves, but I'm going to be harsher. I'm going to say your lawns aren't more important than the destiny of 25 million neighbours on election day, and that's what we're talking about. And we're talking about one day a year. Give up mowing your lawn and go help out on an election booth for 2 hours. 2 hours once a year. Yeah. Just go and help. Don't just choose who the best person is to represent you and your values and the justice of your neighbours. Go and help them get elected and help 20 other people vote for that person as well. That's what the people do who care about trees and carbon dioxide and penalty rates. Now, good on them. They're motivated for what they think the most important social issue is. But I'd say it's not okay for us to just vote. We have to, even if you're in a wheelchair, I take my kids with me to the election booth and I just bribe them with nice food to stay with me there all day. Like, whatever the excuses are, I think there's not very many valid ones for not doing a little bit more than voting. And a little bit is all it takes to make a huge difference because of the numbers we actually have. We are the silent majority, to our shame. We're the majority, but silent is not okay.
So again, Dave, you make a very good case for that, and I agree with you. I believe that if we could get all of those people absolutely politically motivated and active, that would be a great thing for democracy. It would be a great thing for preserving our way of life and having those things implemented that we really need to be implemented from a policy perspective. So I think your rallying call to people around that is very timely. It's very important. The time is ticking when it comes to some of the things that we are losing ground on.
Yep.
So people need to understand that time is of the essence when it comes to people fighting for what matters for them and being absolutely politically active. And so if people watching today take that message away, I think that'd be a great message to have heard.
If you want to get more politically active, it's okay that you haven't, well, no, it's not really okay, but it's time to do something different if it needs to change. If you are concerned about the 25 million neighbours we have here in Australia, the Church and State Summit is for you. It's for people who want to be better informed and better involved than we have been in the past. It's not okay to keep sitting on the sidelines and to keep silent. The Church has a prophetic voice to declare truth to society, to speak up for those who are being oppressed. And the Church and State Summit is an annual conference held at the end of February each year. You go to churchandstate.com.au to register, see what the program is, see who the speakers are that are coming. It's designed to help everybody. It's not for political nerds. It's for teens and tradies and Christian leaders and political nerds. There's something in it for everybody. The feedback from the first one was just how easy it was to understand, how things weren't just theoretical, but things that could be applied and done by everybody. So head over to churchandstate.com.au and have a look at the lineup. Great speakers going to be happening February 2019. Share it with all your friends and get them involved. And if you can't make it to Brisbane, you can even watch it via video. There's a ticket just for you. So all around Australia, get this information to help you get better informed and better involved in loving your neighbours.